There comes a moment in every human life that cannot be described, only endured. A moment when everything you believed about yourself begins to fall apart, not because you did something wrong, but because your soul has decided it's time to grow. Carl Jung wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is the great test, the silent initiation every soul must pass through alone. You don't choose when it begins. You only discover, afterward, that you were being remade. These are the 7 signs that your soul has already passed through that hidden initiation, and that the life you are living now is no longer the one you had before. At first, solitude felt like exile. You tried to escape it. You filled your days with noise, conversations, screens, endless motion, anything that could distract you from the emptiness waiting in the quiet. Because silence, in the beginning, doesn't sound peaceful. It sounds like loss. It sounds like all the things you've been avoiding finally asking for your attention. But slowly, something changed. One evening, you sat in the stillness, and it didn't feel so hostile. The silence stopped chasing you and began to hold you. You realized that what you had called loneliness was actually a doorway. Carl Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." That's what happened. The noise of the outer world stopped being enough, and your attention turned inward. You began to hear the subtle voice that had always been speaking beneath the surface, the quiet pulse of your own soul. You noticed that your energy no longer scatters itself in the search for approval or distraction. You started to conserve it, to contain it, to cultivate it. And in that containment, something extraordinary happened. Your inner world began to grow richer than your outer one. Where solitude once felt like isolation, it now feels like alignment. The space that once scared you has become sacred. You began to see that solitude is not the absence of love. It's the environment where love for yourself is born. You stopped mistaking stillness for stagnation. You realized that silence isn't empty. It's full of answers that words could never reach. In solitude, your intuition grows louder, your thoughts slow down, and what's real within you finally has room to breathe. You notice it in subtle ways. The peace that comes when you no longer reach for your phone the second discomfort arises. The relief you feel when you can sit in a cafe alone and feel complete. The quiet joy of waking up and not needing to perform for anyone. This is the first sign that you've passed one of the soul's hardest tests. The ability to stand alone without collapsing into loneliness. Jung believed that the person who cannot bear solitude has not yet met their self. Because when you finally meet that deeper self, not the persona, not the performer, but the eternal observer beneath all your roles, you discover that you were never truly alone. The presence you were searching for in others was always within you, waiting for silence to reveal it. So now, solitude no longer feels like exile. It feels like home. A sacred space where your energy regenerates, where your purpose clarifies, and where your connection to the divine quietly strengthens. This is not withdrawal from life, it's preparation for it. Because only those who have learned to sit in stillness can carry peace into movement. Only those who have befriended their own soul can love without clinging, give without losing, and walk without fear. When solitude becomes sacred, you've passed the first gate of the soul's initiation. You've discovered that silence was never empty. It was full of you. There was a time when pain felt cruel, random, unfair, almost personal in its precision. You couldn't see the meaning behind it, only the wreckage it left behind. You asked the same question over and over. Why me? Why this heartbreak, this loss, this silence from life when you needed answers the most? But somewhere along the path, after the tears, the anger, the exhaustion, something shifted. You stopped pleading for the pain to end and started listening to what it was trying to say. Because pain, once you stop running from it, begins to speak. Its language isn't verbal, it's symbolic. Every disappointment hides an initiation. Every heartbreak reveals an attachment that was never truly love. Every failure dismantles an identity that could no longer contain your growth. Carl Jung understood this well. He wrote that, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain. The psyche uses suffering as fire, not to punish you, but to purify what no longer serves your evolution." At first, you resist this fire. You do everything to escape it, distract yourself, numb yourself, run faster. But pain has infinite patience. It waits for the moment when you finally stop fighting. And then it begins its real work, transformation. Once you pass through that crucible, you begin to see its pattern everywhere. The arguments that shattered you taught you boundaries. The rejection that broke you taught you self-worth. The loss that hollowed you out created space for something new to grow. You realize that the soul uses pain the way fire uses wood, not to destroy, but to release energy. Every time something burns away, what remains is more essential, more real. And in that realization, the question changes. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" You ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift, from victimhood to curiosity, is grace. It marks the moment you stop being a passive recipient of suffering and become an active participant in your own evolution. Because pain is not random, it is intelligent. It arrives exactly where you are most asleep, to wake you up. It's the unconscious sending messages through the body, through emotion, through crisis, saying, "There is something here you must see." And when you finally decode those messages, you realize that the events which once looked like destruction were actually precise operations of the self, cutting away what was false, forcing you to reclaim what was true. You begin to see the pattern in everything. Pain no longer feels like chaos. It feels like choreography, a difficult, divine design guiding you toward integration. You learn to sit with it, to let it burn what it needs to burn, and to watch, quietly, as new strength grows in the ashes. Jung often said the soul demands meaning above all else, and once you find meaning in your pain, the suffering doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes fuel for depth, for compassion, for wisdom. You no longer fear pain because you've seen what it creates when you let it do its work. You've learned the secret language of the self, the one that speaks not in comfort, but in transformation. And now, when life burns again, as it inevitably will, you won't run. You'll listen, because you know that fire has never come to destroy you, only to make you whole. There was a time when you ran from your own darkness, from your anger, from your jealousy, from your pride, your lust, your need to control. You believed that becoming good meant cutting off everything bad, so you buried your shadow, deep enough you hoped that no one would ever see it, not even you. But repression doesn't erase, it ferments. And eventually, the very things you tried to hide began leaking through your words, your habits, your relationships. Your shadow spoke through you, disguised as projection resentment, judgment, or guilt, and you mistook that voice for fate. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's when everything began to change. You realized that running from your darkness only made it stronger, that the more you disowned it, the more it ruled you from the shadows. So slowly you turned around. You stopped running and started looking. And for the first time, you met your shadow face to face. It wasn't the monster you imagined. It was simply the parts of you that had been unloved, unseen, misunderstood. The child who was punished for being angry, the teenager who was shamed for wanting, the adult who learned to hide power just to feel accepted. You began to understand that your shadow wasn't evil. It was energy. Raw, primal, creative energy. The same force that drives art, courage, and intimacy. When ignored, it corrupts. When embraced, it becomes fuel. You no longer seek purity through denial. You seek wholeness through integration. You stopped pretending to be only light and allowed yourself to be human. Your honesty with yourself has become brutal, but also liberating. You can admit when you're envious, without shame. You can feel anger, without destruction. You can recognize pride, without falling into arrogance. Because awareness has replaced avoidance. And with awareness comes mastery. Not control, but relationship. You've made peace with your own complexity. You understand that everything you once condemned in yourself was simply energy trying to find its rightful place. This is the real alchemy Jung spoke of, turning the lead of your hidden emotions into the gold of consciousness. Your shadow, once repressed, now fuels your creativity, your empathy, your authenticity. You stopped needing to look perfect and started becoming real. And that realness, that raw, unfiltered presence, radiates more light than any performance of goodness ever could. People sense it. Your energy feels grounded, not fragile. You no longer collapse under criticism because you know the worst that can be said about you, and you've already made peace with it. This is the paradox of true light. It doesn't deny the dark. It's born from it. Your illumination comes not from escaping who you were, but from including every part of yourself in who you've become. You no longer fear your own shadow because you've seen what happens when you face it. It bows. It integrates. It serves. And in that moment you realize, the darkness was never your enemy. It was your unclaimed power, waiting for you to come home. There was a time when other people's emotions ruled your world. When someone you loved was angry, you felt it in your bones. When they were anxious, you absorbed it like a sponge. You spent your days rescuing, reacting, and fixing, believing that keeping everyone else calm was the only way to stay safe yourself. Your nervous system was wired to their chaos, and every emotional storm, no matter whose it was, felt personal. But somewhere along your journey through the soul's test, something shifted. You began to notice that not all energy was yours, that the heaviness you felt after certain conversations wasn't empathy, it was entanglement. You started to see patterns. People who lived in crisis, situations that demanded your peace as payment, and you finally asked the question that changes everything. What if this isn't mine to carry? Carl Jung called this awareness the beginning of individuation, when you stop living through other people's unconscious projections and begin to reclaim the center of your own psyche. You started recognizing projection when you saw it. When someone accused you of being selfish for setting a boundary, you could see that they were naming their own fear of abandonment. When someone tried to guilt you for saying no, You could feel their shadow, not your shame. And in that recognition, something powerful was born. Detachment. Not the cold, brittle kind that shuts people out, but the kind that allows you to stay open without being overtaken. You no longer need to catch what others throw at you. You can witness their emotion without becoming it, because you finally understand. Not every fire requires your hands. Some people don't want healing, they want participation. They want you to dance inside their storm so they can avoid facing it alone. But you've learned the sacred art of stillness, of standing in peace even while others unravel. This calmness isn't indifference, it's clarity. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer chase validation through fixing. You've discovered that presence, not performance, is the highest form of love. When you stop absorbing others' pain, you give them back the dignity of their own lessons. You allow their soul the space to grow, the same way yours once did, through discomfort, through confrontation, through truth. And you? You reclaim your energy. Your nervous system resets. Your body begins to trust safety again. The world still shakes, but you don't. Jung might say that you've stepped out of the collective emotion and into the realm of the self, the calm observer at the center of all opposites. From that place, you can feel deeply without drowning, care fully without carrying, love fiercely without losing yourself. You've learned that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the refusal to internalize it. Your calmness now feels like power. Not the power to control anyone, but the power to remain yourself, no matter who is trying to pull you back into the storm. That is the quiet strength of an awakened soul, to stand in the middle of madness and remain untouched, not because you don't feel, but because you finally understand what's yours and what never was. There comes a point, after the chaos and the questioning, when life begins to whisper back. You start noticing things, small, impossible things. A book falls open to the exact page you needed. A stranger says a sentence that answers a question you never spoke aloud. The right person calls at the right time. The right door opens just as another one closes. At first you call it coincidence, but then it happens again and again, until you can no longer dismiss it. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, the psyche's secret language with the universe. It's how the deeper self communicates when words are no longer enough. It's the moment when the inner and outer worlds begin to mirror each other. You realize that these moments aren't luck, they're alignment. You are no longer forcing your life through willpower alone. You've stopped fighting the current and begun to float with it. Something larger seems to be arranging events around you, not according to your ego's demands, but according to your soul's design. You start to sense a kind of hidden choreography, a rhythm that moves through you, through time, through every coincidence. And your role is no longer to control it, but to cooperate with it. This guidance doesn't make life easier. It makes it truer. The path still twists. There are still challenges, heartbreaks, unanswered questions. But beneath it all, there is a quiet certainty that you are not wandering. You are being led. The fear that once drove you to plan and overthink begins to fade. You learn to listen instead, to the subtle pull of intuition, the quiet knowing that speaks from the body before the mind can interrupt. You start making choices not from habit or fear, but from resonance. You can feel when something is right, not because it's safe, but because it vibrates with a deeper truth. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of living in alignment with the self, the organizing center of the psyche, the part of you that already knows where your story is meant to go. You realize that destiny isn't a fixed map, it's a dialogue. Every time you listen to your intuition, you take one step closer to the life that was waiting for you all along. And every time you ignore it, life finds another way to call you back, through synchronicity, through symbols, through signs disguised as chance. You begin to live in what ancient mystics called kairos, sacred time, where everything unfolds with a strange, effortless precision, where you don't chase meaning, you meet it. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you aware. You act, but you also allow. You plan, but you also trust. You stop trying to control the river and start realizing you are the river. This is what it feels like when the ego finally surrenders its crown and the soul takes the lead. You no longer live by effort, but by participation in something infinitely intelligent, something that moves through you and beyond you, a current that carries you exactly where you were always meant to go. And now, when life aligns in those miraculous ways, you no longer say, "What a coincidence." You smile and whisper, "I see you." There comes a point on the soul's journey when pretending becomes unbearable. Not because you suddenly dislike others, but because falseness, even in the smallest dose, starts to feel like poison. The mask you once wore so easily, to be liked, admired, accepted, now feels heavy, suffocating, impossible to keep on. You used to shapeshift to fit the room, to say what people wanted to hear, to smile when you were tired, to hide the depth of your truth just to stay safe. But something in you has changed. You can't unsee what you've seen. The soul has no tolerance for pretense once it has tasted authenticity. You begin to notice how often the world rewards performance, how much of modern life is built on pretending, to be confident, to be happy, to be certain. And instead of playing along, you step back, not in rebellion, but in relief. Authenticity has become your only form of rest. You no longer have the energy to manage impressions. You'd rather be misunderstood for who you are than praised for who you are not. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that's exactly what this feels like. A privilege, but also a shedding. Because to become real, you must let go of every version of yourself that was designed to be loved. You start to see that validation, whether it comes as praise or criticism, is really the same thing. Feedback from outside the self. It can inform you, but it no longer defines you. The need to please dissolves, replaced by a quiet devotion to truth. Criticism no longer wounds you in the same way, because you understand that people's perceptions are mirrors of their own inner world. Praise no longer intoxicates you, because you know that even admiration can become another form of imprisonment. Instead, you begin to live from what Jung called inner authority, that sacred center where your worth no longer depends on external approval. From this space, decisions feel clean. Your words become simpler. Your presence feels lighter. You no longer need to perform goodness. You embody it. You no longer need to seek belonging. Your authenticity draws the right people to you. And this is the great paradox. The more you stop trying to be liked, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're trying to attract, but because truth, when lived unapologetically, has its own gravity. People feel safe around you, not because you say the right things, but because you carry no pretense. You've become transparent, not empty, but clear. Your energy is honest. Your face no longer lies. You stop performing your life and begin inhabiting it. Every word, every silence, every gesture becomes authentic expression. And that authenticity, that unedited presence, radiates something no act could ever imitate: peace. You've realized that the real self does not need to prove its worth. It simply is. And in that stillness, you've found your deepest truth. Nothing you perform will ever outshine what you already are. The performance is over. The audience fades. And what remains is real. There was a time when uncertainty felt unbearable, when not knowing the outcome, the reason, the why behind the pain, was enough to send you spiraling. You needed clarity to feel safe, closure to move on, and meaning to justify what you'd endured. But now, something has shifted. The old you craved control. The new you has found peace in surrender. You've stopped interrogating life with questions it's not ready to answer. You've learned that truth doesn't always arrive on demand. It unfolds quietly, in its own rhythm, like a sunrise that refuses to be rushed. Carl Jung wrote that only in our darkness do we see the light. And this is that moment, the still point after the storm, where you finally realize that peace was never the result of having answers. It was the result of no longer needing them. You used to think faith meant believing in happy endings. Now you understand it's the courage to stand in the middle of the story while the ending is still being written. You can feel this calm in your body. It's not the numbness that comes from avoidance, it's the serenity that comes from integration. The nervous system that once lived in fight or flight has found a home in stillness. You've stopped trying to escape the dark night of the soul because you discovered something astonishing inside it. The dawn was always there, hidden beneath the pain. This is what Jung called individuation, when consciousness stops fighting the unknown and begins to cooperate with it. You no longer treat mystery as an enemy to solve, but as a companion to walk beside. You start seeing meaning not as a single revelation, but as something that reveals itself in layers. You trust the unfolding. You trust your timing. You trust that what's meant for you will return in clarity, and what's not will fade in silence. You realize that not every wound needs to be analyzed. Some are meant to be lived through, to open something deeper than understanding: wisdom. And in this wisdom, you find a peace that no philosophy can give you. It's not loud, it's not triumphant, it's quiet, like the sound of the ocean after the storm has passed. This is the peace of the integrated soul, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances, the kind that doesn't vanish when things go wrong. It's the peace that comes from knowing that you are no longer at war with life. You don't chase explanations anymore. You don't fight endings. You don't rush beginnings. You've made peace with the in-between. And somehow, in that space between the known and the unknown, you begin to feel whole again. Because peace, you've discovered, was never the absence of chaos. It was the presence of trust. The trust that even when the path is hidden, something greater is still guiding your steps. That even when the night feels endless, the dawn is already rising, not outside of you, but within. If these signs resonate with you, it means the hardest part is already behind you. You have walked through fire, and no matter how much it burned, you did not come out ashes. You came out tempered, stronger, softer, wiser. You are no longer the person who entered the storm. That version of you, the one who fought for control, who chased answers, who feared endings, died quietly somewhere along the way. And in its place, something entirely new was born. Carl Jung called this the second birth, the moment when the ego surrenders its crown and the deeper self takes the throne. It's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or lightning. It arrives as peace, not the peace of comfort, but the peace of truth. You begin to see that your life was never falling apart. It was being rearranged to reveal what was real all along. The battles that once defined you, between who you were and who you thought you had to be, have quieted. You no longer need to prove your worth through striving. You no longer need to fix what was never broken. The world around you might still be chaotic, but your center no longer shakes. You can feel that quiet axis inside you, steady, grounded, unbothered by the storm. That's the difference between survival and transformation. Survival hardens you. Transformation opens you. You are open now, not fragile, but whole. Jung said that when the self awakens, life ceases to be about becoming someone else and starts to be about remembering who you truly are. You've remembered. You've reclaimed the fragments of your soul that were scattered across years of seeking and suffering. And now they live together, integrated, at peace. Your peace isn't the absence of struggle. It's the wisdom that grew from surviving it. It's the quiet knowing that you can walk through darkness without losing your light. This is the mark of the transformed soul. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. You no longer search for the divine, you carry it. And when others meet you now, they won't see the fire you endured. They'll feel the warmth of what it made you become. This is what Jung meant by wholeness, not perfection, but the sacred balance of all that you are. The storm was never here to destroy you. It was here to reveal you. So if your life feels quieter now, less dramatic, but somehow more alive, trust it. This calm isn't emptiness. It's integration. It's what remains after the storm has done its work. You've passed through what Carl Jung called the trial by fire of the soul. And that fire, as painful as it was, didn't destroy you. It refined you. You've become the kind of person whose presence brings peace without speaking, whose silence carries light. You no longer need to explain your journey, because your energy is the explanation. Remember this truth. The soul does not grow despite pain. It grows through it. Every loss, every ending, every dark night was an initiation, not a punishment. You've earned a kind of peace that cannot be taught, only lived. And those who meet you now may not understand what changed, but they'll feel it. Because you are no longer trying to become light. You are light, tempered by darkness, and made whole by it. Not perfect, but whole.